What's up, everyone? Welcome. We are live right now on Cannabis, and we have a great episode for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, and you can also find us on Spotify and your favorite podcast apps. Today we have Miles from Fermented Plant Extracts. So we're going to be, if you love FPJ, all the acronyms, but just great organic stuff, basically, to make your plants go wild, we're going to be talking all about that. But before we get too far into it, I need to give some folks some shout outs. First off, shout out to our friends in the cannabis community. If you want to become one of our supporters, join our community, search Cannabis in the App Store, or go to cannabis.app and use the code GROWERSLOVE for 50% off. We appreciate your support. We send out things every month to our supporters, seeds, hats, all sorts of things. So if you want to be a part of that, we'd appreciate it. Also, shout out to Lost Coast Plant Therapy. They're a really great spray, IPM spray that you can use to fight bugs, botrytis, powdery mildew, things like that. It's organic and it's made by some really great people in Northern California that have shown us a lot of love. So if you can show them some support as well, please go to lostcoastplanttherapy.com or look them up on Amazon and buy some of their stuff. Also, shout out to SacredThreeMushrooms.com. If you want to grow some fungi, they can help you. They've got home grow kits and even spores. So look up SacredThreeMushrooms.com. And then our last couple shout outs, I'm going to throw over to JR.
Excellent. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about TikiCuts.com. Tiki's offering some animal mint cake, and it's a thin mint by Animal Mints, but it looks really beautiful, and it's gas. And so I'm always a sucker for that gas terpene profile. And TikiCuts are doing all Gen 1 tissue culture, and they're all batch tested. So all the cuts you get from them are guaranteed to be viroid and bug-free. So, it's a little extra insurance and worth it. And I also want to shout out NeptuneSeedbank.com. Neptune is featuring a project with Umami Seeds and Raw Genetic Collab, and that is the Gyoza, and it's G-code by Zoda, which is Umami's one of their flavor bombs. So check that out and hit up Neptune and Tiki if you can. Thanks for the support, guys.
Awesome. Well, JR, I'll let you put together this show. So I was going to let you kick it off because this is some stuff that I know you're really interested in. And I also noticed your background kind of reflects the subject matter today. So anyways, I'll throw it over to you, to JR.
Well, good. Today we are catching up with our buddy Miles Philipbelly. And we've had Miles on before, and we had a really long episode. So go back and check that out, man. That was some real knowledge breakdowns. And that's one of the great things about having Miles on is his ability to share information. He has a new substrate tonic called Fermented Substrate Tonic for your mycelium and for your preparation of your, yeah, there it is, buddy, for the preparation of your medium. Also, he has fermented plant extracts as well, which you could find at buildthesoil.com. And the guy also represents weed that should taste good. So if you're out there and you're looking for weed that should taste good, hit up Miles. And Miles, welcome to the show, buddy.
Yeah, it's good. Thanks. I appreciate y'all having me and appreciate y'all's efforts in the community for sure. So I'm stoked to be here talking to you.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about. And when we had you on, first of all, we asked you about your how you fell in love with the plant. But today we're going to ask you, how did you fall in love with the fungi and how's it helped you get where you are today?
Wow. Man, when I think of fungi through my life, I think of like hard lessons, there's some teachers and the lessons you learn with the mushrooms can be a little bit more of a, I don't know, for me in my life, they've been a little bit more of a, like the heavy lesson teacher, kind of the hard stuff you got to sit with. So I could talk about all kinds of experiences I've had with these things. We've all, had these experiences with the heavy doses and the going inward and all this. So, I think it's suffice to say that I've had a lot of experiences with the mushrooms. And at this point I take pretty low doses. and I get big effects from the low doses. I eat a gram or two, or I eat some of these tablets that we've been working on, the isolate tablets, that are extracts and isolates of the psilocin, psilocybin. I take about a 1 gram equivalent dose of those usually as like a max. And but yeah, I've just always experienced or loved the experience of like a constant expansion and stretching the mind, and trying out different things to kind of tinker in that realm. And I got started kind of early, and I've had a lot of time to sit with what the mushrooms have taught. And yeah, I'm grateful to be in a place now where they're bountiful and available and more accessible and legal and safer, and there's so many more people, new people coming into experiencing mushrooms and psilocybin than ever, just like 10-15 years ago there was with cannabis. Yeah.
So you have a a passion for sharing knowledge, and just, I see you all over the place, online, just sharing and educating folks. Can you let us know, like, or just share with people, yeah, what have you been up to lately in terms of education and just trying to share knowledge with out there with the community?
For sure. Well, yeah, last year we did a few KNF classes, teaching a specific cannabis specific form of KNF, that Jace Rivera, Touched by Cannabis, developed. And then and I took a class last year. I took a really great class in 2023 at with Young Sang Cho, the Jadam founder, who's the KNF founder's son. So getting an idea of like just the lineage here of what was a progression of things, and how things can be done differently by each different mind, each different personality sees things differently. And that's kind of where I come in with education, is what do I want to, how can I portray things uniquely to people from my perspective in a way that they're going to get, that's not so much of me that's going to, be hard to follow. So I'm teaching natural farming. I'm continuing to do natural farming classes. I'm working with some really cool groups here locally and nationwide, and some schools to try to expand those efforts. But mostly I'm trying to do my own events. So we got one end of this month in Colorado. I'm teaching like cannabis, making cannabis medicine to little old ladies at a seed swap type of thing. That'll be a lot of fun. It's out of Hot Springs. We got a growing for hash and hash making class coming up. We're doing something 710 in New York City. That's going to be part educational, part sesh. Yeah, and I'm doing just this afternoon, later today, I'm doing a cannabis meditation program where we're just sitting with the plant and trying to elevate our experience with the plant and elevate how we see and perceive cannabis as so much more than a commodity, so much more than a product, and more something that's really valuable, that we value in our lives, that we hold sacred, that we can really take a moment and enjoy our time with it, and have a peaceful breathing experience with the plant, and really put it in that place in our minds. And I think that's something that mushrooms has helped me with too, because both these things are really magical, cannabis and mushrooms. You just take a look at them and you see how magical they are. It's like, yeah, they're really beautiful, beautiful
Oh,
beings
wow.
to exist with.
Beautiful. Yeah, and like I kind of want to chime in on what you were saying before about the teaching aspect and the sharing of the information. Someone said to me about a month or so ago that in Korean natural farming is called natural farming. And so you had just mentioned that you're going to be going around and you're going to be teaching natural farming. And so before we get into the fungi talk, can you kind of talk about some of the curriculum and stuff that you'll be
Sure.
talking about?
Sure. So I have a 4-part curriculum that's kind of my standard thing. It starts out with an introduction to living soil and what soil is and how it works naturally. The microbes and the interactions between decaying organic matter and microbes, and how the nutrients are cycled to become plant available through a complex and diverse ecosystem of microorganisms, fungi, bacteria, protozoa, nematodes. And it's not like you need to understand how that ecosystem functions, just that it's there and that we're there to support it. We're there as stewards of not just the plants, not just the crop we're growing, but we're stewards of the entire ecosystem that symbiotically supports that plant also. And when you start viewing things like that in that bigger picture and understanding how those natural cycles work, the techniques that I teach of like, here's how you make your own fertilizer, that all makes more sense. Once you have the empowered knowledge behind it, then you want to do the techniques. So it's a theory and technique kind of thing where I want to explain to people why these things work, and then I want to give them the techniques that work. So I teach how to make different types of inputs out of waste, out of I use Korean natural farming as an example in one of the modules, Jadam as one of the modules, and then lactobacillus as another one, which is kind of separate but very closely related to KNF and Jadam. And again, yeah, these are all Korean forms of natural farming, but there's traditional forms of natural farming that come from all over the world that I like to touch on, like biodynamics. There's natural farmers all over the world who make their own inputs that are similar to Jadam, KNF. So I look at myself as just part of that lineage, part of that force of knowledge that's coming together through the internet and through people talking and through the cannabis community, primarily for me, just to be moving that knowledge and progressing that knowledge and sharing it with people and opening people's eyes to the potential of making their own inputs, of using less and less synthetic and chemical fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, all that kind of stuff. Less of that, and more of the natural way.
I think it's important because I think it's just natural for most people when they get started, myself included. You just go to what's like the easiest to get. And in my case, it was easiest to get and fastest to get to my house. You know what I mean? So it's like you just buy whatever bottle of nutrients you can get off online or whatever, and sharing this knowledge so that people can understand how they can go organic in all different aspects of growing and use it for not just like feeding their plants, but like making the plants healthier and all sorts of stuff. I love that kind of path of knowledge and just learning about how to kind of work it all in. And speaking of that, we're going to talk all about fungi now. So we're going to move into that kind of segment of the show. So to start with that, Miles, can you kind of talk us through or just kind of give us an introduction to what is the life cycle of a mushroom?
Sure. So when we talk about mushrooms, we're talking about a specific type of fungi, Basidiomycota. It's the type of mushrooms that make mushrooms. It's the type of fungi that make fruiting bodies to disperse their spores, which is what we call mushrooms. There's lots of fungi that don't have this expression, this above ground fruiting body expression that is generally there to propel spores. So what mushrooms all have in common is the mycelium. And mycelium is made up of little tiny strand-like cells called hyphae. And those hyphae basically stack end to end until they have strings, and those strings wrap together into each other and make cords, and those cords weave into each other and make big bundles until they're big enough that we can see them with the naked eye. And that is generally, for what we deal with, saprophytic. It's a decomposer. It breaks down dead organic matter. And that's what we call its food supply, or its substrate, like what it's living on and eating at the same time. So that mycelium, those strands and bundles of fungal hyphae, eventually kind of consume or cover, encapsulate their food supply. They reach all corners of it. And once they've sensed that they've reached all corners of their food supply, then they trigger to spread out and go to find new food supplies far away or nearby, whatever the case may be. And they express this this desire or this intention in the form of a mushroom, a fruiting body that extends out of the substrate, opens up, and propels spores outward. Those spores hopefully land somewhere where a new food supply is, and they start the process over. So that's a mushroom.
Okay. How deep is the quick question that I had, and then I'll let JR jump in with his question. But I was thinking about this because my wife and I and my mom, we went out to the redwood forest, and we saw where there was a spot where like the top kind of layer got kicked up, and you see the white kind of, it almost looks like ash almost, but it's like the hyphae I think that you're talking about, right? So my question is how deep is that kind of, that whole process that you're talking about, how deep is that into the soil layer? Because I've also thought about it when I'm like inoculating my pots or a worm bin or something like that. I'm thinking about like how deep does that whole hyphae, that whole kind of system work?
So that's dependent upon the species that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Some species, like they'll go deep. They'll go into like, you know, whatever depth that the food supply runs, but the main mycelial coating and the main mycelial kind of mass is where the food supply meets air or meets something else. Like it's like a barrier. And that's generally along those barriers or along that open air is generally where you're going to get the mushrooms happening. Again, there's types of fungi that don't express mushrooms, that don't express fruiting bodies, like mycorrhiza, generally the root associating fungi that live on the plants, living plants' roots, live inside the plant's roots, actually partially inside of them. They'll live wherever the roots go. They coexist symbiotically with the roots. So however deep those roots want to run or are able to run, those beneficial fungi, the mycorrhiza, are going to be right there with them.
Okay.
So I mean, different fungi have different habits and preferences, and I mean, even then, like we're learning and seeing things in the wild do things that we didn't otherwise think capable or preferential for them. So mushrooms are great adaptive. They learn new things. They change over time and figure out what they need to do to function best in their environment. And that's one of the great teachings that they can share with us, is that how to function best in our environment, how to roll with the punches and learn new skills, learn new things in the face of new obstacles and new food supplies or whatever the case may be.
JR, you're on mute there, buddy.
I saw a post from Paul saying that they design pathways, highways, streets, and inner city pathways in a more efficient and complex way than we could ever even imagine as human beings in the way that they're distributing and moving. I think that's really incredible. So now you talked about substrate a bit. We hear about wood loving and dung loving. Can you kind of talk about the indoor substrate that most folks kind of come in contact with when they're trying to make their own indoor fruiting bodies?
Sure. I mean, and again, this is dependent on the species that you're growing. Most people we're talking about are going to be growing cubensis. That's the magic mushroom. That's the one that gets all the attention, and that's a dung loving. If you were going to grow, say, shiitakes, you'd want a wood loving mushroom. I can't remember the specific. It's like ligniculus, the lignin eating mushrooms. Ligniculus, I love that word. Anyhow, these guys, they have preferences. All these species have preferences based on food supply and environment. So they like it a certain temperature and humidity, and they like a certain type of food supply. Most indoor growers were using like a peat, compost, dung, in some cases actual manure, dung, and grain to spawn with. So there's a lot of very traditional, like established growing habits now in the in the fungi world.
Well, I'm from the Northwest, and we have our beloved azarescents, and they grow in sand and beach grass. And so you kind of being plugged into the community, have you come across people indoor cultivating azzies?
No, man. Actually, I just was talking to somebody who was doing pancyans indoor, and I was like, bro, like, what's it take to grow a pound of those? And he was like, forget it. Like, it's like they're like so. No, I don't. I think that I'm sure they're out there. I'm sure somebody's doing the azzies, the azarescents, and I think that it's such a treat in these local regions. Like, I've never been up there and collected psychedelics.
Come on out.
I know it sounds so magical, but I'm from the South, so we used to get the pancyans in the like cow fields, and along the creeks around the cow fields, but we never found cubes.
That's more Florida, right?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe I'm not as I'm more of a food forager nowadays than going out looking for trippers.
Yeah.
Like us, we got the tripper. Like the cultivation of these is getting pretty advanced in the genetics of them. So, I think as we see the scale of cultivation grow out of like home and basement and hobbyist realms and into more commercial minded, large scale stuff, we're going to see access really expand.
Well, tell me about your new product that you just mentioned, or at least it's new to me. I'm not familiar with it. So that's it's called a Fermented Substrate Tonic. Tell me all about it. I want to learn about it.
Yeah, so it's very similar to my other products, to a fermented plant extract. And where this came from was I was perusing some old literature by Taro Higa, the EM originator, the innovator, the inventor of effective microorganisms. I believe he's a Japanese scientist, a doctor, and I was working in a mushroom farm already, doing some like taking their blocks and then repurposing them. So I'd been in this mushroom farm and I was watching the farmer, the mushroom cultivator guy who I'm friends with, spraying down his blocks. And then I'm going through this old Taro Higa literature, and I see a picture of a guy doing the same exact thing, spraying down mushroom blocks on racks and everything. And I was like, oh, what's this? So I really delve into that article, and they're talking about EM1 and EM functions in like outside of traditional agriculture, outside of soil, and the treatment of fungi with a bacteria was finding good results in increasing fruiting, in decreasing the time between flushes, heavier fruits, denser fruit, less contamination. So I mentioned this to somebody else, a mushroom grower, and they said, yeah, that's in a Paul Stamets book. I'll try to find it. And we found it's in one of the appendixes of, I think, the mushroom cultivator or the mushroom grower, it's called. And yeah, Paul Stamets even talks about a bacterial fungi relationship where there's proven certain bacteria assist and like there's a symbiosis there. They help the fungi do what they're doing, because out in nature they all coexist together and do fine. So using those kind of two leads from my primary sources, the innovators that I follow, using those leads, I started doing experiments of my own with the ferments, primarily the mushroom blocks I was getting from the farm that I was repurposing and growing more mushrooms on. I was soaking them in water. The first thing I did to get them, I was rehydrating them in water. So I just took a jug of ferment and just poured it in the reservoir where the mushroom blocks were soaking, and took those out and put them into my little mushroom hut where I'm growing mushrooms. And the fruit seemed to be better and seemed to be more vigorous and quicker. And yeah, so I kind of ran with that. I started telling some mushroom growers to play with it, and it turned into this product that now we've experimented with it enough to know that it has a lot of different uses. You can treat the substrate, the food source, anytime with it. It's got it's anytime you're adding moisture to your substrate, you can dilute this into it.
Nice.
And mist it on, spray it on, however you're applying the moisture.
And just for clarification, can you go over kind of what EM1 is as far as its biological function?
Sure. So EM is a proprietary blend that's commercial, but it's widely accepted to be a certain family of lactobacillus or a certain wing of the lactobacillus family, probably with a couple few others. R. palastri or Rudopseudomonas palastris, couple other yeast-loving and yeast-producing bacteria, probably, but it's kind of proprietary. But generally, we consider it to be lactobacillus, and generally, like the homemade version of EM1 is considered just to be a lactobacillus serum or a lactobacillus mix, which is the microbes that I use in my products. This is the primary family of fermenters that I'm using to digest plant matter and to create the fermented plant extracts and this fermented substrate tonic. Both are lactobacillus based.
Interesting.
And so they're like a bacterial ally that kind of helps outcompete other bad bacteria or other contaminants who might try to come in and take a hold, correct?
100%. Yeah, the lactobacillus are antipathogenic by nature, which means that they fight off the bad guys. And they're saprophytic, which means they only eat dead and decaying things. They only break down dead matter. So they're not ever going to attack or hurt a living thing. And they're going to fight off things that do attack and hurt living things. So yeah, they're a bacterial ally would be a great way to describe it.
Nice, bro. So now that we're kind of moving on to our mycelium growth within our substrate, what kind of are for our indoor cultivators of various varieties, what are kind of the optimal growth conditions for mycelium as far as darkness and temperature and humidity and all that stuff?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I got the expert right here. I don't know my I know ganja a little bit better, but mycelium likes it a little bit warm and wet. The general parameters are.
Have your boy sit down. We don't care.
Yeah, you want to sit down, Scott? Scott's the cultivator right here.
So I like.
Move over a little bit, Scott, so I can see you.
Oh, am I? Hey.
There you go. What's up, buddies? So when we're trying to colonize our mycelium, what are the kind of parameters that we're really trying to hone in on to get a good mycelial mat?
So I feel that it's going to depend on what kind of mushroom you're growing, like he was talking about. We're obviously just interested in the ones that are creating fruit, But so yeah. So if we're talking about cubensis, though, then I kind of like a little bit. So there's colonizing temperatures, there's fruiting temperatures, and then there's like shock to fruit temperatures. And a lot of people will kind of neglect that. You can cool when you're wanting to instigate fruiting, like how you were to transition your lighting for cannabis. So I like my colonizing temperatures anywhere 70 to 75. I like them on the low side because you get less of they'll warm up within the block, and then you have less of a propensity or ability for the trichoderma and the contaminants to take effect, because they take effect closer to 80 degrees. So your fruiting chamber can be about 75, but like uncomfortable and happy. But colonizing, I try to rock it under because there's not a lot of airflow. A lot of people will even seal them in bags. I just put lids on them and throw them in drawers. Tub life over bag life all day, if that clarifies.
Yeah,
he's a mushroom expert.
That's how I kind of got my start with the tub. And I was telling Miles, I did my first round of hillbilly pumpkins, and I got enough out of my 3 flushes to give me at least a year's supply of microdosing. And then now I've moved on to the pink oyster mushrooms that I'm doing for a culinary party that I'm having on Wednesday. And so I was really stoked to see that mycelial mat just kind of firm up. And then I'm seeing just these little blotches of pink that look like they're just ready to punch through. And it really is beautiful. So, how do you know when your mycelium is fully colonized and ready to be exposed to the light for fruiting?
Yeah, you're gonna see that mat, right? I mean, you see it. You see it. The colonization happen. Usually, it's that mycelial mat.
When it's complete on top, usually. So, but then in your bag, you're kind of looking for it all the way around.
Nice.
It's like a white fuzziness. It's pretty obvious. I mean, and even the smell changes. Like everything in that space changes. It's a marked difference.
So, when I'm like populating, or I guess the better word is inoculating, when I'm like inoculating my tub or bag or whatever it is, what's the kind of ratio to spawn and substrate? Like, how do I do that? Because I'm a noob.
So a lot of people will say like, let me think. I'm trying to remember one of the big heads, one of the big companies that it sells, and a local I think concurs with this. They'll say throw 1.7 pounds of grain into 5 pounds of substrate. I say you can up to match them, but a lot of people will say like 3 to 1. 3 pounds of substrate to 1 pound of grain, and that substrate could change depending on what you're growing. And like for instance, with your oysters, I just tried oysters in like a cube environment, like a mono tub, and it was a cool experiment. But I think that if I was going to go back, I'd probably do them in bags and like a Martha tent. What's your take on what you've learned so far with them?
This was my first time fruiting them, and what I noticed is everything's on the edges. Like I'm not getting a lot of fruiting down the middle, and I don't know if that's common or if that's because of my environment, but it seems like all of my fruiting is only on the very edge of my mycelium mat.
But in a tub?
Yeah, in a tub.
Yeah, so I did the same thing and I tried it a number of times, and I really just wanted to get something to inoculate my garden beds outside with, and so I got 4 cakes and was like, all right, this isn't the way. So what I was going to do when I go back is go to someone that makes like a master's mix bag, because they're like really saprophytic where they'll take on the wood. The oyster mushrooms will take on the wood directly. Yeah, and it takes too long to break it down for the cubensis to like it. In nature they do, but it's already broken down. And like the lacto is such a big, like his lacto product is such a big thing, because think about it, in nature, where do they exist? They exist in cow shit, which is all a lacto process, and it's killed everything else in there. So it's made a sterile environment more or less, but it really nurtures the mushroom spores, they're not affected by it. And so they have this clean environment with all this readily available food that even heats up in the field while it decomposes and then dries out. So they'll fruit. It's like, mwah. And so I really am a huge advocate of this product. A little birdie told me he might have let me test it before he got it on the market.
Nice. Well, that's really cool because I think for people, that's one of the obstacles is contamination is always a barrier. It seems like, and just a strong fruiting or a strong, mat that will produce those fruiting bodies.
Well, SAPs, steps and procedures, it's like people will give you 20 links on one thing, and you're like, what do I do here? How do I do this? How do I get this medicine to me, I've been pondering with some people some links, like just some collections of links that would be helpful. Maybe our guy here would be the one that has the reach to put that out to a number of people.
We'll just put it up on the site when it's time. But yeah, the mushroom community is a really amazing place. I'm grateful for y'all to tap into it, because it's kind of new to me. Like I've always been into mushrooms, but really growing them is kind of new to me. And I've always been a cannabis cultivator. And this has been a really cool way to connect to connect what we do all in a holistic way.
Yeah.
It might be new to him, but you should have seen the first flush that he like, I was going to say drained, but soaked those blocks in his ferment just to see, like just the pictures from them were like spent blocks, oyster bag blocks. And they were going nuts, huge fruits out of something that someone else had already thought was trash.
That's so great. That kind of leads me on to one of the questions I had. Is I know a lot of the folks who are practicing living soil practices are really digging the mushroom compost for their for feeding and for supplementing their plants. Can you talk a little bit about mushroom compost?
I mean, the waste products from all this, from ag, from mushroom cultivation, all this organic, living organic material is so valuable, especially like when we've been talking about the idea of like a living substrate for mushrooms, because it's more than just the fungi in the mix. You're putting these bacteria from the ferments in there, from the EM bacteria, the lacto. That's really creating a connection in our minds to living soil, to living substrate.
And there's a symbiosis with the mycelium directly.
Yeah, and this is where the waste products and all this comes into picture. That we're dealing with our own waste, mushroom compost, in a good way. Generally, cannabis cultivators deal with the waste of their crop in a pretty holistic way. We're the use the whole plant kind of people generally. But when it gets up to really high scale, that becomes an issue on big farms. But really, like, that's where the natural farming education and stuff comes in. Thanks. Thank you, Scott.
I'm here. Tom.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, man. This is.
Yeah, I appreciate chatting with you guys. I just didn't want to hog in. And he only had me on the clock for 20 minutes, so I don't want to bill him for overtime.
Fair enough. Thanks, man, for your time.
Thanks,
Appreciate
brother.
Good vibes. Yeah, so I like mushroom compost. There's a place in Colorado, Hazel Dell, I'll shout them out, that gives away and sells their mushroom compost by the truckload. There's I think it's a good living waste product to mulch with. A lot of people, Build a Soul has been selling hay, straw, inoculated with oyster to mulch with for years. And originally that was a byproduct from a mushroom farm that was nearby. South River Aquaponics. Since I think they closed since then, but yeah, there's an immense potential in all these waste streams. Even in the KNF stuff, to do fish, to do whatever waste we can get our hands on. There's always going to be some natural farming technique to turn that into richness in the soil, food for mushrooms, bacterial ferment material, whatever it is, whatever it becomes. We've got a use for it.
Well, I like that. A lot of the younger generation, I won't say a lot, but I'm noticing there's a movement in the younger generation that is trying to bring back their connection to their food sources and their ability to produce their own food and to take their own land and create multiple revenue streams and multiple ways of producing for themselves and for their communities. And one of the things I thought was really interesting, and you'd mentioned it, is these pre-inoculated wood chips and stuff. So you can have bed gardens, and in between your beds could be inoculated wood chips that are going to then in turn provide another form of food, another form of revenue potentially for you as a revenue stream. And so I'm really stoked to kind of see how that whole thing is picking up momentum, and I think you could probably speak to that.
Yeah, I think there's a species that does exactly what you're talking about. It's called people call it the garden giant, or I think it's called the Strophoria. It grows in wood chips in the pathways of gardens often, and especially if you inoculate those wood chips, if you're using the lactobacillus, fermented plant extracts, the substrate tonic, EM1, any labs type of product or preparation, that's going to assist in, if you're using it on your garden beds, it's running down some into your walkways full of wood chips. If those are inoculated with the Strophoria, that lactobacillus and bacterial cooperation is going to help. So yeah, these things, it all starts to play in. It's a holistic concept, and once you start seeing the different settings, whether it's compost pile, ganja garden, mushroom substrate, pathway in the garden, you start seeing it. Oh, this is where the symbiosis is happening. This is where we as humans play into the play of nature and existence and all this,
That and the sharing of information, and the knowledge is the power.
Yeah, man. And then every time you exchange information, you also exchange energy. You know, and
Absolutely.
anytime there's an energy exchange, there's a information exchange too.
Well, we're heading into the home stretch of the show today, so we're gonna end it this last session on just kind of fermented plant extracts and that kind of the whole world of ferments. Is there anything new? What's the latest in the land of fermentations?
Well, I think the Substrate Tonic is the newest thing. I think that building the knowledge around these things into people's tool belt, I would call it. Getting this knowledge of basic lactobacillus production and its uses into broader acceptance and knowledge. It might take a few university studies or college studies talking about it, this versus that in some specific setting, but getting this knowledge out there into a broader scope, because it's really cool to grow ganja with it, and it's really cool to grow mushrooms with it. And if we could get it into more into ag and more into scale mushroom production, I think we can reduce our dependence on other regrettable alternative type of chemical fertilizers and pesticides, and generally increase productivity in a natural way that's accessible, that we can do ourselves, that we can produce ourselves.
Now, so one thing that we've never really talked about is the cannabis plant itself providing its own nutrition, like harvesting roots or harvesting small shoots and all the different phases of the plant. Can you talk about the plant's ability to provide nutrition for itself?
Yeah, that's a big part of the Jadam system, is that like feeds like. And in nature, the leaves of a tree drop and create a mulch and decompose and keep the tree fed. It doesn't need some bale of alfalfa to roll over and fall on it every year, mulch it. It doesn't, so ultimately, plants live in either their own environment or in a successional environment where they come after something else. So building soil is a concept of the successional style, where we're creating a succession that's already happened. Let's say a bunch of crab shell meal and a bunch of oyster shell, a bunch of gypsum all decomposed right here, So, yeah, the soil life is really where the magic is, though. That's really what happens is that we're most applicably mimicking is the living aspect of it, and that's the biology. And I'm playing my part getting the lactobacillus in the soil. There's other great biological products I would shout out Rootwise. I would shout out all compost, like homemade compost and worm castings. All kinds of great products out there to get biology into your soil.
Before we get into our last question or so, I wanted to ask you a rapid fire question, which was, if I just want to get started with your stuff and I don't know where to start and I'm going on to build a soil or wherever, what should I get started with? Which product of yours should I check out first?
For sure. I always say the comfrey is kind of my go-to. Comfrey and nettles more recently, those both are kind of all-purpose. You could use them if you just had one bottle. You could use comfrey and nettles the whole way through, veg and bloom. Also, if you're making your own compost or doing any kind of leaf mold making, or if you have anything, old piles of manure, old piles of waste, you can treat it with these products to help it decompose, just like you would.
Cool.
Yeah, it's an accelerant, the decomposing element. But yeah, the pumpkin, peach, watermelon, those are all great for blooming, and designed specifically for flower production and fruit production. Willow is a newer one that I just did, and that's an ancient, the willow water.
I saw that. Is that based off of, it's probably not the right word to say, but pussy willow? Is that kind of willow, or is it a willow?
It's like the tree willow. It's like weeping willow. It's
Okay.
really like soft branches, but that's always been used for cloning willow water.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and
Gibberellins.
salicylic acid.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So that's the trigger for also for a systemic acquired response, like a stress response in the plant that like it gets stronger because it thinks it's being stressed, but it's not actually getting stressed. It's just getting that signal.
And then, is there anything in the bunch that you think are kind of extending along those lines, helps the plant fight off bugs or pathogens or anything like that, mold or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, as a comfrey, like there's studies about comfrey water and comfrey teas being beneficial against pests. I could shoot y'all one of those. I've got them somewhere on the computer world. But
Well,
yeah, there's
Sam's still dealing with PTSD from the last season, and he's gearing up for this season, and it's already the top thing on his mind.
Well, you're always just trying to make how do you learn, or how do you get better each year? That's one of the things that's I like about growing. I'm glad that I have it as a hobby and that I've stuck with it for years and years and years. Is just it's something that forces you to learn to take your time and just go through this kind of learning process and pick yourself back up again after you have some fails. There's a lot of like really important life lessons in growing. So, anyways. Well, Miles, let's see. JR, did we have any last questions for Miles before we let him go?
I just want to hit him up for some of the events that he maybe just did, talk about NECAN maybe a little bit, and some of the events you have coming up.
Yeah, NECAN was fun. It was it was a good showing. A lot of people showed up, and yeah, it expanded from last year, which is always nice to see an event grow.
Yeah.
And that region needed something. So, more and more people coming up from New York for that is good. But we're bringing it to New York. We're doing something with High Seas Gallery on 7/10. I think it's a Wednesday. So we'll probably be doing something on either weekend in New York or New Jersey around there. We're doing I think in June, we're supposed to do a hash class. I can't really speak on that because it's not solid yet. But yeah, where's my schedule? What else are we doing this year? Oh, Minneapolis Lucky Leaf, April 26th.
At June 1st, am I going to see you at the Dew Grows Cup there?
Yes, Dew Grows Cup is happening. I'm supposed to do that with somebody else. Somebody's coming with.
Good. It's going to be a great time, brother. We're going to be happy to have you.
It always is, man. Yeah, I always have fun at that. I gotta lock that one in. And then May, the end of this month, next weekend. Geez, I'm doing a class. Also teaching little ladies to make canna butter and cannabis oil.
That's cool.
That'll be fun. Yeah, cannabis. It's at the longest. It's one of the longest running seed exchanges in Colorado. It's out of Hot Springs. Joyful Journey next weekend. San Luis Valley Seed Exchange.
Beautiful.
So, big ups.
Awesome. Well, shout out your website where people can learn more about you and just dig in more.
Thank you. Yes. weedshouldtastegood.com and Weed Should Taste Good Apparel on Facebook and at Weed Should Taste Good on Instagram. And then fermentedplantextracts.com for the ferments and for all the educational stuff. I have some online classes on there, like over 6 hours of online class material with PowerPoints and photos and stuff. So Fermented Plant Extracts, Instagram, at Fermented Plant Extracts, all the vibes. You guys can find me at the .coms of either, or you can get my email off the websites. However you guys prefer to get in touch with me, I'm available on the socials and on the emails. I generally am pretty quick to respond.
Sounds good.
But yeah, I'm here to help people learn about this stuff. I'm here to learn. We're all making it through day by day and figuring this thing out.
That's right. That's right. That's cool, man. It was really good to touch base with you again. I like being able to check in on my homies and see how things are going because I follow you all the time on Instagram. I
Yeah.
see you, I see you out and about doing what you're doing, but I just love to get your butt in the chair and just kind of, catch up, my friend.
So good to catch up, man. I really appreciate this opportunity to connect with not just y'all two, but y'all's whole community that you're building. And thank you for the efforts to build this community and hold it together and do in-person events too. Because there's no replacement for meeting people and for the first time that you've known online or having a joint with people. And there's no replacement for that connection. So thank you all for this.
Yeah, man, thanks for your time. I just add on to what JR said. I see you get referenced like randomly when I'm watching other videos. They'll be like, oh yeah, Miles on blah, blah, blah. So it's like, you're out there, man. You have a really great reputation. So we really appreciate you sharing the knowledge today. Talked about some really cool products, which I'm excited to check out. Because I also, I've got a big worm bin going on, and I'm always like trying to figure out how can I make my worm bin more poppin'. So I'm going to look at some of this stuff right after this call. But thanks so much, Miles. Thanks, JR, for your time today. Thanks for putting together this show. Thanks, everyone in the Cannabis community for supporting us. We had folks in the live stream today. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Thanks to our supporters, the folks that sponsor our shows. You can see their names scrolling down at the bottom of the screen throughout the episode. Please make sure to check them out and show them the love. We only allow like great products to support us. So if their names are down there, it's not bullshit. It's good stuff. Thanks everyone for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And as always, JR,
Growers love.
Peace.